Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Herculean Physique, I'm glad to have Ryan Foley, who will share his wisdom, insight, and experience. Greetings, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, sir. It's good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you. I love your backdrop. It is
Well,
always
I figured it would be on theme. So it's so hey, before we get going here, I was curious. This switching over to YouTube, it's been a neat experience to go through, and so I know that YouTube has this option where you can go through and read the transcript. So I have to assume that's probably AI generated. So I'm going to see if I can go through and uh, tailor my speech so that way it'll show up well on the. And I'm already kind of stuttering and stammering here, but I'll do my best to go through and so that way the closed captioning will work. Hopefully.
that is awesome. I haven't put in closed caption yet, but I haven't gotten around to checking the transcripts. I know that Zoom also has a transcript feature now, so I'm assuming it's AI.
Okay. Well, so hey, since we talked last month, I was curious. I wanted to check in with you to see how you're doing with your physical therapy.
I finished my initial round of physical therapy today, and they're asking for more physical therapy dates. This physical therapy is different than previous physical therapies I've been to, in that they're trying to get my body to be more, to be able to stretch more.
Oh, okay.
And I'm used to exercising my body with weights, so my body's constricted. So they think that the constriction has caused some of the problems I'm experiencing. So they're trying to get me to do other things like a lot of stretching and mobility type of exercises. And my body is fighting that because, again, my body's used to being one particular way. So I'm doing my best to learn something new and to try something new. But I am going to restart some of the exercises, even with lighter weights, that I've learned through bodybuilding and strength training because I felt better when I was doing those. So I'll still do the stretches, but I won't abandon what worked for me in the past.
Sure.
Uh,
Which is harder, working out in the gym or doing the physical therapy?
the physical therapy has a gym. I work out at home. I have a home gym.
But
So
so, which do you find to be more challenging?
my home gym,
Okay.
because even though they have the machines there, they want my body to work on mobility and stretching, so they don't have me doing anything heavy. Physical therapy is because I love leg exercises. So in
Sure.
past physical therapies, because I'm very dedicated to doing the exercises, they rewarded me by letting me do leg presses, and to see how heavy I can handle. This group is having none of it. They don't want me to do anything really heavy, so it's all very light and very slow. And again, I'm resisting that, which might not be good, but I am. And I'm starting occupational therapy next week. And then I'm going to a few specialists, a neurologist and a gastroenterologist. So this will be a process of discovery and experimentation.
What exactly is operational? I'm sorry. What'd you call it? Operational therapy or
Occupation,
occupational?
that's
Occupational.
mostly for my hands. I have neuropathy,
Okay.
neuropathy. So my hands don't have the mobility or the grip strength that they used to have. Like, for instance, I used to be able to hold my fingers open and resist the squeezing them shut. I can't do that anymore. Now it's very easy to close my fingers, for instance.
Okay. All right. I'm with you.
uh, because of like if I'm trying to take my vitamins or whatever medication I'm being assigned at any particular point in time, it's very hard for me to open up the lids of the bottles of medication or ibuprofen, whatever, and then pour them in my hand and then put them in my mouth. It's very, very challenging, and sometimes it demands more dexterity than I'm able to muster. So fortunately, I have a broom scooper near where I'm sitting. And fortunately, I have a wonderful wife who, if I can't pick it up for whatever reason, will come help me pick it up.
Good. Good. Well, so and not if we're digging into an area that's too personal,
No,
we can.
I've been pretty open. Uh,
Good. Good.
I have a show dedicated to getting older, and the people on the show are people who used to lift weights, either as bodybuilders or strength builders or just generic weightlifters or power lifters. who can't do it anymore. And so what do you do if one of your lifelong passions that help define who you are to a very great extent and communicated the truth about yourself, all of a sudden you can't do that like you could do it before. So it explores that whole question. In Greek mythology, on pottery fragments, the stories don't exist anymore, but on pottery fragments, you have Hercules facing old age. And in some of the drawings that have been preserved throughout the centuries, Hercules looked like he's trouncing old age. But then another one, they seem to be like kind of like equals having a chat. So the way I interpreted that is that once you start getting old, you recruit everything, exercise, vitamins, herbal teas, all sorts of fringe or cutting edge scientific techniques or ancient techniques and meditations. But then eventually you come to terms with the fact that this happens to everybody. So if you make it past a certain point, this will happen to you most likely. So then it takes on a different meaning, and you come to terms with it, and you learn to just live until you're no longer alive, and to enjoy every single moment you have, because that's all you've got really, and you don't know how long those moments will last. So it's been a process. I'm a very positive person. The way I see it is that everybody has challenges, and these are my challenges in the here and now. So I'll meet them to the best of my ability and as much as possible with a smile on my lips.
Well, it's inspiring for what you said, and I do know that that's probably going to. I mean, it's an issue that we're all going to come across eventually. Hopefully, we get to a point. But so you're on this mission. You're not going to go through. So it's just you're finding a way to adapt into the gym where maybe you're not lifting quite as heavily as you were before, but you're still going through and pushing yourself with weights, just with not the amount that you were able to do in the past.
Correct. It would be ridiculously light weights that I'm using right now, but I am using weights. And also, people have been recommending things to me. And the show isn't like this show. It isn't so much to tell people you have to do this. It's sharing a journey that's focused on pretty much the same area for everybody, and they're sharing their experiences, what works for them right now, what hasn't worked, what they discovered along the way that might be helpful to somebody else, and just sharing the information. So with the other show, you have a bunch of older gentlemen, and a lady just joined us. She's going to be on the next show, who have the passion for weightlifting. And this is what we're learning. This is what we're trying. This didn't work for us. And I've stepped up my donations to local library of health books. So we're not advocating any one system in the health book. And these range everything from bodybuilding to holiday cooking, so there's a wide range of different things people might be interested in on their own quests for optimal wellness. So these were part of my journey that didn't stick. And these are parts of other people's journeys that, it wasn't, it didn't stick enough to want to keep the book, in other words, on their bookshelf. But
Sure.
instead of throwing it out or whatever, we're offering it freely to anybody who could use it. And this also helps local libraries where we give most of the books.
And from the sounds of things, yeah, the libraries are going to need they're going to need all the help they can get
Yes.
here, unfortunately. Well, so since you mentioned that, um, to throw in my own little anecdote, um, so back whenever we talked in February, I was pretty open about the fact that I had gone through and I had suffered a bit of a setback in January, just motivation wise. Whether it wasn't just one single thing; it was a variety of things that went through and stacked in, and as that usually is the way in life, it's death by a thousand cuts, as
Hmm.
opposed. So I've always, as for a metaphor, I've always said I'd rather deal with a great white shark than with a swarm of piranha, because at the very least, with that great white shark, it's one thing that I can go through and focus on. That's rarely the thing that gets you. Whereas the piranhas are coming through and they're nipping at you all a little bit at a time. And so that's kind of what I experienced a bit in January, was all those nips finally kind of started to take their toll on me. But I will say that here in March, I don't know if it's the time change, the weather change, whatever it is. I found my hunger again. I found my passion
Great.
again.
That is fantastic.
It may be, I don't know if it's, again, I don't know if it's the weather, the seasonal change. Maybe I'm finding some different exercises, or maybe I just finally got out of my head because I was going through and I was worried about things. And that worrying went through and, began to compound the problem. And everything just kind of kept stacking on top of itself. But this is where, so what I would say is if you're on a program, it's going to be like anything. There's going to be those ebbs and flows, and you're going to find those times where it feels like you go in, and I think that's one of the things that's so frustrating about the whole thing is there are some days where I go in and it feels like I can lift the entire gym.
Hmm.
And then there are other days where it's like, man, I don't have the mind muscle connection. The endurance is gone, the stamina is gone, and so but that's where I tell myself, well, okay, we're going to be back in here again tomorrow. So you put in the best effort. You summoned up the best effort that you could muster. You tried, and this workout wasn't as great as some of the ones you've had in the past. You'll get it back eventually. So it's ebbs and flows, man. So if you go through and you find your motivation waning, I think that it's okay to get knocked down. You just don't want to stay down. You want to continue to be able to push on with your goal. And so if someone is experiencing that right now, I'm telling you, I'm living proof. Just keep pushing through. You'll find your way through eventually.
I found that true of anything, even writing and publishing and doing community work or anything I happen to be doing. In the beginning, you don't even have to know what you're doing or how you're going to do it. Just commit to doing it and take every day. And everyone's going to fall, not once but countless times. But it's not the falling; it's the getting back up. And what did you learn from that fall? So that you try
Exactly.
not to repeat it. And sometimes it takes a few falls to figure it out.
And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight, which really it kind of ties into that as well. Um, okay, so for I work in insurance. I work for a small insurance company. We do home insurance. And so while we've been around for over 100 years, but there is a small percentage chance that if there were to be a cataclysmic level of storms or fires or whatnot, our doors have to close. I mean, it's that way with any insurance in business. You'll see that in the insurance industry, be it with the wildfires out in California, the hurricanes down in Florida. So our business, I mean, there's not an unlimited level of money, and so we're doing just fine. I mean, we're going to be okay. But there always is that we don't know what tomorrow will bring. And Oklahoma, we are still in Tornado Alley. And so if the wrong tornadoes were to come through at the wrong time and hit too many houses, we'd be in trouble. So the old saying is it's the unexpected blow is the one that lands the hardest.
Mhm.
But at the same time, anxiety can cause us to suffer twice as much as we should be. So we're worried about too much. Now, that's not to say that you can't just go through and just, live life like there is no tomorrow. You do have to, you have to plan, you have to be smart. But so basically, you come along and you have your battle plan and you say, okay, I need to be prepared. What if the enemy appears over here? What if the enemy appears over here? And what if they appear over here? So I've got plans for those contingencies. But then after that, you just have to roll on with your life. So it's good to go through and plan. But so this kind of got me thinking, because storm season, it always does. And boy, what would I have to do if I had to go get another job? It's if the business shuttered, and so we're doing fine, everything's good. But so my mind being kind of a bit of a creative one, I kind of entertained that idea of, boy, what would I have to do if I had to go back out and start my job search again? And so inevitably, you're going to have those conversations with the people that are doing the hiring, and they would say, okay, well, Ryan, what's something that you're the most proud of? What's one of the greatest accomplishments that you've ever done in your life? And, I've got a few. It's starting over in 2012, from zero and climbed my way back out of that. The raising of my three kids, very important thing. And then so if I'm going through and I'm listing all the stuff that I've done, um, 2014 has to be on that list because in 2014, in June of 2014, I made the conscious decision to say, I'm not happy with my physical appearance. I'm not happy with my health. So I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And that's when I joined a gym. And so when I got started, man, I knew less than nothing. You know, I had a little bit of experience lifting weights whenever I was in school playing football, but nothing compared to the level that I'm at now. And so, in combining this, it's important for me to state here that, man, I have failed. I mean, over and over and over again in this journey, in my writing, in my relationships, all that sort of stuff. But the important thing the distinction that I put here is I've failed a lot, but I have still never considered myself a failure.
Good.
So I'm working right now on the plot of my 8th novel. Still believe in love, still believe in romance. So that hasn't jaded me. That hasn't burned me up too much. And I'm still in the gym 6 days a week. So 6, sometimes 7 times a week. So if I was going to go through and I was going to list, for a job applicant, well, so what's one of the things you're most proud of? And I say, I've been bodybuilding for almost 11 years now, and I receive no financial, restitution for every time that I go to the gym. Even if I fall off, it's not like I'm penalized for it, but I still continue so I don't get rewarded and I don't get penalized, at least, monetarily or whatnot. So, but yet I'm still in there every single day. I feel like I've never been able to escape from the look of a power lifter as opposed to a bodybuilder. So I'm still trying to transition from power lifter to bodybuilder, and it's difficult to go through and do that. But here I am still trying 11 years later, and I'm still trying. I'm still doing this thing. So if I'm willing to do that for myself for something to which I'm not receiving any sort of financial compensation, imagine if someone hires me, and you're paying me money. So if I go above and beyond for this, imagine what I'm going to do for you if you guys are cutting me a paycheck. So in going through and doing this and being on this journey that I've been on, so if I was going to go through and encourage people to go on a similar journey, one of the things that I would point out, like one of the number one things is that, and I mean this in the most positive and hopefully inspiring way, but no one cares. And so when I say a little bit of a pregnant pause there, just because I want that to sink in just a little bit. And I do think it's true. No one cares. And my evidence for this is, so up at my gym, they have a listing of the top 15 most active people. And so whenever I was going through my stuff in January, I had fallen down on the list. And so I was ranked number 8. But I couldn't tell you who was 7. I couldn't tell you who was 6. Yeah, I couldn't tell you who was above me. All I saw was my listing in the ranking because that was all I paid attention to. And then I moved on. And so it was the same way in February. I jumped up a couple slots, but I still can't tell you. I can't tell you who was above me, but I could tell you how many people were ahead of me. So in going through and doing that, it's our own ego that we have to kind of tamp down and realize that no one's really paying attention to you. So I say that gym goers, especially once you get into, if you're in like a commercial gym, what you're going to find is that typically the biggest and the strongest guys, they're going to be the ones who are the most helpful. They want to share their information with you. And so I think it's more along the lines of, we see you, but I'm not paying attention to you until I see you doing something maybe that's wrong or is going to get yourself hurt. And that's when I'll step in and say, hey, let me help you with this exercise because I don't want people to get hurt. So no one's paying attention to you. And I think that's one of the things that keeps people out of the gym the most is because they feel like they don't look like they belong there. And I've mentioned it here before, but I feel it's worth repeating, and that is making fun of someone, making fun of an obese person at the gym is like making fun of a homeless person at a job fair. They're exactly where they want to be, and it's not a zero sum game. We want everyone to succeed when they're in
Right.
that gym. And so that's one of the first rules that I would tell people is that if you're worried about standing out, or you're afraid that you don't feel like you belong, or it's believe me, you're right where you need to be. And hopefully that gives people a little bit of confidence to go through and continue to either start or to continue on with their journey.
You're right, and it's a transformation process that doesn't happen immediately, which is what some people think. Some people think if you take the proper vitamins or if you take the proper steroids, that you'll automatically have a bodybuilder's body. And some people don't exercise with that excuse. Oh, I don't want a bodybuilder's physique, not realizing that it takes decades to chisel that physique the way it is in the magazines, and that some of those folks had assistants that they shouldn't have taken to get there. Um,
Right.
but you have to keep at it and keep doing it. I remember when we first started talking, I had been published in a lot of magazines, but I'd never been published in a book form. And since that time, I've been published in over 20 paranormal anthologies, with two coming out this year, one of them with a major publisher. So you and several other authors gave me the same advice: just write. And so, okay, don't know where to start. I'll just write. And one thing led to another. And the more I got published, the more invitations I got to publish. And now people consider me prolific. Haven't gotten to my novel yet or to my textbook yet, but I've written tons of paranormal anthologies. So I'm happy with that.
That's absolutely fantastic. And so, fantastic point. And yes, you're absolutely right. I think if I was going to give someone a piece of advice, it consistency. Consistency is the key to go through, because we've all seen it's a sitcom trope.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I've got my class reunion is coming up, and so they're working out really hard at the gym, thinking that they'll go through and change their bodies overnight, and they won't. We know that. But so it is. It's a slow, gradual process, and so that's where you have to have faith that you're doing the right thing, and so you're just continuing to put in your hard work. But one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received was that it's that the bigger you get, the smaller you feel,
Mhm.
and you're always constantly analyzing and trying to figure out, okay, well, I want this to be a little smaller, I want this to be a little bigger. And sometimes I think we can get lost in that we don't see the progress that we're going through because we see ourselves every single day. Um, my son was telling me the other day that he was talking with every town has that one guy who knows everybody. And so my son was telling me that he was talking with that guy who knows everybody. And he was like, hey, your dad, he's like really, and he did the jacked motion. And I don't consider myself that way. But obviously this other person did. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Well, that kind of makes me feel good. That someone else is out there noticing. And so in going through and doing that, and I've had a couple of my friends who have come to me and said, hey, how do I get started? What do I do? And so I just, I went up to, it was a woman that wanted me to go through and help her get started. And so I went through and asked one of the regulars up at the gym, who's also a woman. I was like, hey, what can I tell her to get started? Because obviously, training for a woman, it's going to be a little bit different. And so what this young lady's advice was, don't be afraid of the heavy weights. Or at least I was like, if you were just starting out, what would you come back and what would you tell yourself? And so what she said is that I wish I wouldn't have been so afraid to go through and pick up those heavy weights, because she was under the impression that if she went through and started lifting weights, she would get all big and bulky. I completely understand that. And to that, my argument would be, I've been doing this for 10 years trying to get big and bulky, and I can't do it. So it's not like you're going to come along, and you're going to pick up a pair of dumbbells and you're immediately going to turn into She-Hulk. It doesn't happen that way. You know, it takes a diet and exercise and a whole lot of stuff in order to get those muscles to develop. So it again, if this is someone who's just getting started and you stumbled into this to this YouTube video, that would be another piece of advice that I would give to people is that don't be afraid of lifting smartly. It's form is always better than the amount of weight that you're doing. So don't lift with your ego, but so lift what they call manageable heavy. If you go through and you lift manageable heavy, that's where you start to see better results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very true. And that myth that anybody who picks up weights, they're going to become muscle bound, and so they need to avoid it. That I don't know how that started, because it certainly isn't true, and it's certainly not backed by any observation. And even with the help of chemicals or super vitamins, you're not going to grow muscles right away.
But one of the things that I have found that I think being on this journey that I've been on, it has provided me with it. It's much the same way that the sculptor doesn't go through and continue to add clay. They're going through and they're stripping away the inessential.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about how I would describe this. And so me being, playing video games in the 90s, there was a video game called The Sims. It's still out there.
I remember. Yeah.
It's changed a little bit, since the original version. But so in The Sims, you would go through and you would create your character. And they gave you like so many little chits to go through, and you would go through and you'd fill out the five little categories. So I mean, you couldn't be everything. You had to choose how to disperse those chits in order to create your character's personality. And for me, it's kind of along the same thing. You have to decide, where do I want to go through and where do I want to dedicate my time? Because I've only got so much time that I have, in a day. There's only so much energy that I'm allowed to expend. So where do I go through and I start changing things? And once you start to get into a program where you're really starting to get serious and you start to see those results, and then you realize, okay, so let's say I need anywhere from, 15 to 20 sets in order to build in the course of a week, in order to build muscle in a specific area. Okay, so I was going 2 times a week and lifting weights, and uh, 2 times a week isn't cutting it. So now I got to bump my levels up to 4. So you get to a point where I'm at, and you're lifting 6 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to go through. You have to start cutting away the stuff that's not important. And so again, muscles grow when we sleep. A lot of people think that you make muscles in the gym. You don't. You make
No.
muscles when you're resting. So sleep is tremendously important. So then you decide, okay, so I'm going to start prioritizing good sleep. So now as a result, which means if I'm going to be up at 6:30, I got to be in bed by 10. So that way I can go through and I can get my solid 8 hours. I'm not staying out till midnight. I'm not staying out till 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't have time for that because it's going to compromise my workout in the morning. So you
Mm-hmm.
start going through and you start making those changes. And then all of a sudden you start looking around and you say, okay, well, maybe I'll only go through and I'll only have, one beer instead of having 6, just because you go through and you start counting the calories. But so by going through and doing all this, what you do is you find a way to improve your life because you were intent on going through and improving your workout. But then what happens is it starts to radiate outwards. And then the next thing you know, I mean, you're finding improvements in different areas of your life that you didn't even anticipate. And then you start stripping away that inessential, and you realize what's really important in life and where you want to spend your amount of time. Look, hey, I would love to be able to learn how to play the guitar, but again, I'm doing my writing, I'm doing my gym work, I'm doing my 9 to 5, I've got to sleep. So you just have to go through and prioritize where you want to spend that energy. But I think that when you go through and you start dedicating yourself to a program like that, it starts to bleed over and it improves your life tremendously.
I believe that 100%, and that's very much where I am as well. I'm 66, and the days before me are less than the days behind me, and I'm aware of my mortality and the finiteness of things. So the question, how do I spend my time here, has become very central to my existence. And I'm finding the same thing too. There's a lot of things I would have liked to do. Like I used to travel a lot. I would have loved to travel again. It's not going to happen at this particular point in time when I could barely stand up for that long and I lose my balance because of the neuropathy fairly often. So I could release that. And there's other things that I've always wanted to do or that I've done a little bit and I wanted to do some more. They're not going to happen right now. So rather than bemoan the fact they're not going to happen, I release them knowing that it'll help me identify the things that I really want to do. Like for instance, uh, with the exercising, regardless of the fact that I can't do what I was doing before, and I have it in my mind, I'm positive I'm working towards healing optimally. So who knows? I might be able to do it again. But if I'm not able to do it again, I will do it to the extent that I'm able to the best of my ability. So it might not be anywhere near what I was doing when I was younger, but I'm doing what I can do in the moment with all that I have. And it was that important to me that I did not let this go. The same thing with my Greek mythology. That's one of my passions. I have a lot of other passions besides Greek mythology, but it's always been Greek mythology at the center of it. So that is something I'm not letting go of. I'm doing a lot more. I'm filling my days with more Greek mythology. I'm teaching Greek mythology. I'm doing programs on UFO aliens in Greek mythology. So, different things, but I'm filling my life with as much Greek mythology as I can. My wall is full of pictures from Greek mythology or the Sword and Sandal movies. Your graphic novels are on a shelf not far from where I am. Uh, I have an entire bookshelf on books that pertain to Hercules and nothing else. And so that's my passion. I can indulge it in any way that I can. So I'm doing it to the extent that I can. And the people in my life too. What do you call it? I don't know you. We haven't met, but we've been talking for years, and I like you a lot. So I look forward to the time that we spend together once a month, for an hour, and occasional message back and forth. That is special to me. And other people in my life that are special to me, I treasure the moments we have together because again, I don't know if these moments will come again. So I'm going to enjoy them now to the best of my ability. I'm going to enjoy being with and talking with the people that I care about, for as long as I can talk to. And that's not something taking me away from anything else. It's something in and of itself I've learned. So I won't impatiently push someone away because I want to finish writing something or I want to finish doing something. They're just important, if not more important, than the things that I'm doing. Um, so that becomes a priority for me. And again, it sounds sad, but it really isn't. I feel quite joyous from all this. Everyone has to learn this, so this is my turn to learn it. So I'm going to learn what I can on my own and learn from what others have learned as they go through this process.
So one of the things that um, to touch on what you are talking about here, I've been doing a lot of research into Stoic philosophy.
Hmm.
Stoic philosophy, boy, not to go too deep down a rabbit hole, but very simply, the best way I know how to describe it is life is 10% what happens to you, and it's 90% how you react to it. And so there is so much in our lives that are completely out of our control.
Right.
And yet, so how we go through and how we respond to this. And I think more than likely, there has to be some sort of intense universal truth that I'm willing to bet that somewhere out there across the planet right now, there are two friends that are talking to each other just like we're doing here, and they have figured out something. Even though they're not connected to us, they're figuring out the same thing that
Yes.
you and I are talking about right now. And so lifting weights, it is very much a science. And so people are going through and studying that science, and then it's going through and it's opening up more doors. And yet we're coming to that same conclusion. It's that thing, it's 2 + 2 = 4. That's a universe. I missed an opportunity there. I should have said like 2 + 2 = 5 just for the joke, just for people to go back and go, hey, wait a minute. But no, but so 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, it's a scientific principle that can be proven over and over again. And so I think there is definitely something to this. And so, yes, I could absolutely come on here and I could talk about the proper way to bench press, but there's going to be guys out there who can explain the science probably a lot better than I can. But going back to your point, yeah, it's for you and I to come in here and talk about this. What I hope is that other people come away from this and go, okay, well, so if these guys can do it, we can do it too.
Right.
And so that's I like for people to go through. So what you're saying, about it's our time being limited. It's and yet I my circle is very small. But so a buddy of mine, we recently did a reconnection, and so we're getting together and we tell each other that we're going to play World of Warcraft. But then we get into the game and we don't really do a whole lot when we're in there. It's mainly us just being on the chat channel, so that way we can talk to each other, and it's helping prop each other up, and so this is the same way to go through. I think, man, I think COVID really messed us up to a point where there's going to be, like, they're going to study this thing, from now, kind of figure out where things went wrong. But emotional connection, that I absolutely love tech. I embrace it full force. But yet to go through here and to talk about the important things, and I do think that this is something that's very important in life. It's to go through and to find that improvement, not to be better than the guys who are ahead of me in the list at the gym. I don't see that as a competition, because I'm not in competition with them. The only person I'm in competition with is myself from yesterday. I just want to be a little bit better than I was yesterday, because there's always going to be someone out there that has a lower body fat percentage or can lift more weight, but I'm not interested in competing with those guys. And maybe that's because I am a little bit older. It's the idea of wanting to be better than everyone else, that I have to assume that that has to come with age, whereas it just, or you realize it's not as important as you thought it was whenever you
Right.
were in your youth.
Yeah, that's very true. That's why the youth of today and the young people of today and people who I would have considered middle age are young people now to me. Uh, but climbing career ladders and things like that, I remember those days, and I climbed several career ladders successfully, and I felt good. But now it doesn't really matter. Like Socrates, I realized that when all is said and done, I really know nothing. That everything I've learned, sometimes something comes and contradicts it, and I have to unlearn it. And like now with the physical therapy, making me do things that I've resisted doing my whole life because I was lifting weights. So you don't stretch and become flexible, you become constricted. You pump those muscles up. So priorities change. We stand in different places in different times, and we see things a different way. And that's part of life. That's what makes life special. We're not writing this in books, but we're talking about it, and it'll exist in the ethers, and people can find it if they find it, or once they found it, they can come back to it, and we share experience. And there are places where they can write comments and share their own experiences, or they can contact us and say, "Hey, I have something I want to say about that," and then we'll have them on as a guest. So
Oh,
this,
cool. Well, so boy, just to circle back, because I am curious. Okay, so I like to work out in the morning, just so that way there's nothing that can go through and knock me off, during the day. I find it's a better way for me to start my day. But since I work, during the week, I do constantly find myself in a bit of a time crunch, where there are some days where it's like, boy, it was all I could do to get to, that time limit. And then there's other times where it's like, man, I hit the time limit and I still wish I had time to do more, but I got to get out of here because, I've got to get to work. How long are you stretching for?
well, I always did some stretching because, but during my warm up or sometimes doing exercises. But right now I'm doing only stretching. So I'm finding that
And how long does a stretching session in physical therapy last?
in physical therapy, I'm there for a whole hour,
Okay.
and I'm there currently twice a week. And
Because I do feel like stretching is one of those areas that I need to spend more time on. But it's just it seems like it always gets shuffled to the back, and
me,
I run out of time doing it.
but if you can avoid what I'm going through now, if you could fit in a few more minutes of stretching, it might be worth it.
Okay.
The areas where there's the most constriction are my shoulders,
Okay.
and my upper back, where I can't, because of the arthritis pain in my lower spine, it's hard for me to stand up straight. So they have me doing a lot of these where I'm like lying down and I gotta rotate my shoulders to flatten my upper back a little bit more. And then they have me lifting my legs with like a belt, and holding in different positions and doing
Oh, right.
some things like
Okay.
that. And then my torso, walking and twisting my torso deliberately, exaggeratedly, if my hands are going to be moving and swaying back and forth. And I'm finding I have a lot of stiffness in my torso. So those are basically the ones that they're spending the most time on. Today they tried applying heat that helped for a little while, but not for too long a while.
Okay. Well, so that's something that I'm going to have to go through, and even if it's maybe before I go to bed or something like that. But I think stretching is something that I definitely need to
Yeah,
incorporate
you
more
spare
of.
yourself this, Ryan. I would
Okay.
one of
Well,
our
so
Michael Del Russo, he has back problems too. So we have long conversations both on and off the air about different things we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and things that medical professionals will tell you that if you follow them, you should follow them because it's been recommended, but it'll turn out to be false. And well, you learn this in the gym too. People tell you gym stories that they were told to do something, they did it, and it didn't help. Then the physical therapist told them to go back to doing what they were doing, and that did. And I was doing a workout for my stretching, and I was told to stop doing that because it wasn't the best way to stretch my vertebra and blah blah blah. So I stopped doing it, and a lot of pain was a result of my not doing this daily stretching. So the physical therapist told me to go back and do what I was doing before. So, uh,
sure.
so again, I don't know if that'll help anybody else, but if anybody can spare themselves this discomfort, I'd recommend that they incorporate a little bit of that.
Sure. Well, boy, so man, to give someone practical levels of advice, just something that they can go back and return to. So, how do once you go through, you've got your motivation, you've got your program of what you want to do. So, how can you turn how can you turn your motivation into a routine? And then more importantly, how can you turn it into a habit? And so we'll have to establish what's the difference between a routine and a habit. Okay, so the best way that it was explained to me, so imagine that your brain is this thick jungle. And whenever you go through and you're going to concoct a new idea or something that you want to do, you're going through and you're hacking your way through that jungle. It takes a lot of brain power, it takes a lot of energy. I didn't have a chance to check it, but I think I can swear I read somewhere once that because our brains are so developed, it ends up chewing through like 20% of our calories that we burn throughout the day
Wow.
because it takes a lot to go through and power this big brain that we have. So the best way I know how to describe it is my experience many, many years ago when I had to take the ACT test. I think out there on the East Coast, they probably call it the SATs. I think it's two
Yes.
different tests. Okay, but I mean, so this is something, it takes you hours to go through. We went through, we took it as a group. And so then a lot of the people that I graduated with, we all go to a restaurant, a fast food place after we took the test, and no one said anything. Everyone just sat there because your brain had just liquefied. You just like you didn't want to think about anything else. So by going through and doing that, I would rather be physically exhausted than mentally exhausted any day of the
Mhm.
week. Mentally exhausted is terrible.
It's
But so if you
horrible.
want to go through and you want to do something, I'm sorry, say that again, sir.
Yeah, it is worse to be mentally exhausted than physically exhausted.
Absolutely. So if you want to go through and you're going to go through and develop this new program, you're going through and you're hacking your way through that jungle. And so that first initial foray through it is going to be extremely difficult. But then the more that you do it over and over again, you start to develop more pathways. It starts to develop, so it goes from you hacked your way through, now you've got a path, you keep walking it, it's going to turn into a street. And if you do it for years, eventually what's going to happen, it's going to become a highway. So it just becomes second nature to you. The best way that I could go through and describe this is look at how alert you are when you're driving in a place that you've never been before. But conversely, if you're making the same commute back and forth, you can leave work and make your way home and you're like, how did I get here? You know, because you were so lost in your own thoughts because you've just been doing it over and over and over again. So the difference between a routine and a habit is that a routine is where you've gone through and you've set everything up. Cooking is probably the best way I know how to describe the routine, because you know I'm going to go through and I'm going to put these ingredients in this order, and by going through and doing that, I'm going to get this expected result that I've had over and over again. Whereas a habit is just something that is so ingrained within you, you don't even think twice about it. So if you think about your brain, so there's a time where we go through and there's going to be the wise planner, but then there's also going to be the impulsive toddler. And so the wise planner, you're going through, all right, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to do these workouts. And I need to figure out, okay, so what's the best exercise for me to hit the upper part of my chest and the middle part of my chest, the lower part of my chest. So I'm going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to, stack it in with these exercises. So it is a very mentally intensive thing that you have to do. And then eventually, once you get to a point where you've done it enough, then the impulsive toddler kind of starts to take over. So now you're not even thinking about it. So if the wise planner is in control the whole time, you're wasting too much cognitive energy. But then again, also, if the impulsive toddler is the one who's always in control, the impulsive toddler is not thinking about tomorrow. They're not thinking about, the consequences of their actions. They just want to be satisfied. So what you want to do is you want to go through and develop your program and your routine to a point where you barely have to think about it. And so the best way that I know how to do this is to go through and set up that routine. So you set up the routine to where it's going long enough to a point where now it's just completely become a habit. So for me personally, and with the weather changing, it'll get even better. But so whenever I wake up in the morning, I do not check my phone. Or at the very least, if I'm on my phone, the only thing that I'm checking is the weather. So the weather, so I know, do I need to wear sweatpants? Do I need to wear a jacket? All that sort of stuff. I want to go through and set myself up for success. So the gym bag that I take, I make sure that it's packed the day before. I want to go through and I learned whenever I was raising cows, if you're going to make a bottle for one, you might as well make a bottle for all four of them, because you can fit four in a bucket. So if you're going to have one calf, you should just go ahead and have four, because if you're making one, go ahead and make four. I do the same thing now with my protein cocktails that I make that I'm taking to the gym. So it's like, okay, I'm going to make them up in batches. They're all ready to go. So everything is done to a point to where I can basically operate on autopilot as much as humanly possible. So that way I don't even think about going to the gym. It's just, well, time to get up, brush my teeth, grab my gear, boom, and I'm out the door. And so by going through and doing that, so again, if you only have so much energy to expend in a day, I want to keep my brain on autopilot for as long as possible, at least to the point where I get into the gym. Then I'll think a little bit, because I've been, again, the Daily Stoics. I've been doing a lot of research on them, watching a lot of YouTube videos with those while I'm doing my cardio. So that way I'm kind of getting, I'm learning something while I'm going through and dealing with the boringness of cardio. And then I'll go through and I'll do my lifts. And then it's time to go to work. And so then I'm going to go through, but my body is energized. And so now I can add all my thinking into the first part of my day. So that way the second half, I can kind of shift into cruise control. And so by going through and doing that, what I've found is that has gone through and improved my lifestyle tremendously. It's staying off that phone, not getting sucked into social media or Reddit, whatever everyone's arguing about today. I just found it's much better that way if you can go through and you can keep it on cruise control. So establishing the importance of that morning routine, that has really been the difference for me here as of late. And so there are some times where it's kind of like, oh, if you didn't want to go to school, or if you didn't want to go to work, and so you're laying there in bed and you're convincing yourself, oh, I'm really not feeling that well. and then you just end up believing your own story.
Right.
But if you got to make rent, if you got to pay for groceries, you're not, even if you're not feeling well, you're getting up and getting out there after it anyway, because the rent ain't paying itself. So it's kind of along the same lines. So it's not giving myself an excuse to go through and lay in bed, and I'm not going to let anything distract me from staying in that autopilot for as long as humanly possible.
That's very true. And when you're on autopilot, if you start deviating from the routine that you programmed into yourself, you'll feel terrible. And we've talked about this many times before. If something comes up that it's unanticipated but important, you're going to miss your workout. You feel miserable that you're missing your workout.
It's such a weird phenomenon, and it almost seems counterintuitive. Where if I was to explain this to someone who was looking at it from the outside, yes, you're absolutely right. I have missed, or I felt bad after missing a workout, but I have never felt bad after a workout. So
Right.
you would think it would be the other way around, but yeah, it's like the more that I do it, the more I need to do it, and then, but it's firing those systems, and also again with the massive amount of protein that I eat in order to fuel my muscles, and then going through and then just the jump start to my system every morning. I think that's the reason why I've survived COVID twice with minimal issues. I make the joke all the time that I heal like Wolverine because I eat so much protein. It's if I get a little ding or something like that, it doesn't last for much longer than a day. So yeah, going through and doing that, improving that healthy lifestyle, being whatever it is. Now, I personally think that bodybuilding is the best sport,
Me
but
too.
whether for you, if it's swimming or gymnastics, whatever, yeah, but as long as you're getting out there and moving, then I think that that's something that it helps you so much more in the rest of your day.
I believe the same. And I find that the best way to uh, correct a bad habit is to develop a good habit and then start feeding the good habit and eventually replaces the bad habit rather than continuously fighting the bad habit and then feeling bad about the fact that you've taken that extra puff of the cigarette or you've taken that extra spoonful of ice cream or whatever the habit you're trying to fight is. Just develop better habits and feed those until you feel bad when you're not eating right.
And it's going to be different for every person, but it can be as simple as 15 days to develop a habit. It could be as many as 250.
Hmm.
So developing a habit, it's something that takes a while. It's going to vary depending on what you're wanting that habit to be and who you are as a person. But by going through and training that habit, once you get it ingrained into your system and you can lock in on autopilot. But I will say, so that the negative aspect of being constantly on autopilot is that sometimes you can go through and you can fall into those traps. And I've fallen into this far too much, where I'm just working out the muscle group that is kind of hurting the least. So instead of being on a more regimented schedule where it's like, I know I need to train legs this day, maybe instead I choose to do arms. And so it's kind of one of those things where I have to walk that balance line where I need to go through and break my workouts down, but I just need to do it far enough in advance to where then I can go back into autopilot and say, okay, you're just going to do this exercise group this time around.
My love of leg day is an example. Most people hate leg day and they'll do anything they can to avoid leg day. I loved leg day, and when I was a heavy lifter, I would really love leg day. And I love leg day so much that my physical therapists in the past have let me do leg exercises to reward me for doing their physical therapy exercises. And so I see it as a reward where other people see it as punishment. And
Right.
that too, it's just basically like you said, the story you're telling yourself and how much you bought into the story and how much you repeat it. And life is what we tell ourselves it is to a very great degree.
Well, so just to close, because I know we're running out of time. One of the things that often inspires me is when I go through and I find a brand new exercise. I
Mhm.
like to go through and experiment with it and figure out how much I like it. I've shifted from doing the lat pull downs to doing more of a lat pull over because it goes through and it isolates my lats a lot more. But so there's a fantastic exercise that I found. So the tricep boy, real simply, the tricep has three heads. And so you need to go through and develop all three of those heads, together, so that way you can develop that well-rounded arm. As the old expression is, curls are for the girls, tris are for the guys. Triceps are something that we go through. Men will notice triceps on another man more than the biceps. So I found a new exercise as to how to train. So there's, without getting too much into the technical details of it. So basically, there's the outer tricep, or the outer head of the tricep is what I should say, and then there's that inner head. So anything that you can go through, where if you're doing a press down, that's going to work that outside head, and anything where you're doing an extension like above your head, that's where you're going to see the development on the inside of your tricep. So it's a little bit awkward, but if you have a cable system that you're working off of, and especially if you have a really low pulley, it's a little bit of a difficult maneuver to get into. And so I had to do this. Not that I'm afraid of looking foolish, but it was like I waited until the gym was empty, because I was like, man, how am I going to do this thing? But so there's a variety of different names for it. I heard it, one was referred to as the samurai, another person referred to it as a katana. If I was going to be like really deep into my 80s pop culture references, I would probably either call it like the Storm Shadow or the Snake Eyes, which is so a reference back to G.I. Joe, because I like to go through and name my own exercises. I do a twist at the waist where I'm doing a punching motion, and I imagine myself as Captain America. And so he's got the shield, and you're doing that lateral strike. So it's like, okay, so I'm going to do my Captain Americas, I'm going to do my Thors, I'm going to do my Orc axe block. But so if I was going to call this either the Snake Eyes or the Storm Shadow, what you're doing is you're taking that cable, and I use a single rope extension, but I want to make sure that the bottom of that rope, there's typically like a ball on the end of it that you can use to brace your hand, and you want that to come out. Oh, see, again, my selfie game is not great. Okay, so you want the ball of that rope to be on the back side of your hand. So you'll have to go through and then twist the cable around you, so that way the cable is running behind your back. And then, like a samurai, you're imagining yourself where you have your tricep ready to extend, and you're pulling the katana out of the, oh man, pit stain. That was terrible. So anyway, so you're imagining that you're drawing the katana from out of the scabbard in the
Right.
back. So by going through and doing that, it's a little bit more. So if you go through and you're doing, skull crushers or something like that, your arms are very tucked in very narrowly. But with this, it's more of a drawing motion, and so I found that ends up targeting those outer muscles in just a slightly different way. But that's always what we're trying to do, is we're trying to find these new exercises to go through and hit those muscle fibers in such a way that confuses, or so it shocks the muscles into learning something new. So the katana draw, the Storm Shadow draw, the Snake Eyes draw, however you want to call it, that's been an absolutely fantastic exercise that I've been working with, and I highly recommend people putting that into their rotation.
I do something very similar. I don't have cables right now at home, but I take the dumbbell and I'll put it behind my head, and I'll pull it up like this.
Right.
So it's similar to drawing out a katana. I'm sure it's not the same thing as the cable. The weights will be different, but I've done something similar, and it does feel good. I like, now that, again, I can't lift heavy, I do one with my triceps where I do a regular, like a hammer curl. Then I
Okay.
then I do a sideways hammer curl, and then I do the one behind the neck, again, like a hammer curl.
Sure. Yeah.
So those are the way I hit my triceps. Thank you. That was a good. I'm gonna try it in someone's cables now. Just this.
Good. Yeah. Hopefully it works. And it's fun. I don't know if that makes me a dork. It probably does, but I was just like, oh man, look cool. I like this. Yeah, the katana draw. I could just imagine them pulling that sword out. So I was just like, yep, it fit right into my wheelhouse. Whenever they described it that way, I was like, yep, that's going in the rotation. And then I went through and tried it, and I was like, oh yeah, I really like this thing. So it ended up working out well for me.
And like, you imagine yourself being Captain America and samurais and things like that. Jack Kirby's Eternals, where they lived in Olympia. They had
Yes.
all sorts of futuristic looking buildings. I imagine a gym uh, drawn by Jack Kirby for the Eternals. And in my mind's eye, put myself in, I'm exercising on those devices and things like that when I'm doing my mental visualizations before working out.
Sure.
So alas, we're out of time for today, but again, I'm giving you something to look forward to for next month. Uh, how can people enter your world and learn from your wisdom and experience?
By boy, this is normally where I would say, hey, we need to go through and promote this on Facebook. We're going to have to find a new way. We'll have to find a new tag for that.
On YouTube. People
Yeah,
build communities on YouTube, so we might as well build a community there. I
yeah,
played
absolutely.
Mastodon, I played with Blue Sky, I played with LinkedIn, I played with a bunch of them. They're all good, and I'm still playing with them. But in terms of building community, I think since everything's going on currently on YouTube, that we do it on YouTube.
Okay. And then boy, I'm terrible at self-promotion. I really am. I gotta become a better salesman. So I would recommend if you go to Amazon.com
Mhm.
and you look up Ryan Foley in books, that's where you can find the graphic novels, you can find my prose novels, all that sort of stuff. That's where you can find the majority of my catalog.
And Ryan is a good friend, and he's a great writer. He's a great bodybuilder, but he's a super extra great graphic novelist. And his Greek mythology graphic novels are my absolute favorites. And again, I have shelves devoted to the topic. I have bookcases devoted to the topic. And his Hercules graphic novel especially remains my favorite graphic novel.
Coming from you, it's very high praise, and I thank you. I thank you so much for that.
And I thank you, and I wish you a wonderful month. May you reach all your goals successfully, and may you have more insight for us next time around.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, good night, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.